More than 5 centuries ago, in the golden age of the Italian Renaissance, a painting appeared that stunned the world. It was unlike anything Europe had seen before, ethereal, sensual, poetic, and utterly revolutionary. This was the birth of Venus, Sandro Botticelli's timeless masterpiece. A painting that did not just depict beauty, it redefined it. A painting that dared to merge mythology, philosophy, religion, and desire into a single breathtaking vision. And yet, behind its radiant surface, lies a story of secrets, of forbidden love, radical ideas, hidden symbols, and one man's struggle to capture the divine on canvas. Alessandro di Mariano di Vanni Filippi, better known as Sandro Botticelli, was born in Florence in 1445, at the heart of the Renaissance. Florence was not just a city, it was the engine of a cultural revolution. Under the powerful Medici family, artists, poets, and philosophers were rewriting the rules of art, science, and thought. Botticelli grew up surrounded by this explosion of ideas. He studied under masters, absorbed classical philosophy, and quickly developed a style that was lyrical, spiritual, and deeply human. But Botticelli was different from his contemporaries. While others pursued anatomical perfection and scientific realism, Botticelli sought something beyond the physical, the essence of beauty itself. To understand the birth of Venus, we must first understand the world that created it. The Renaissance was not just about art. It was about rediscovering the wisdom of the ancient world. In Florence, Plato's philosophy was being revived, especially his idea of ideal beauty. Beauty that elevates the soul and leads the mind toward the divine. Mythology was no longer seen as pagan superstition, but as a metaphor for universal truths. And the Medici, Florence's most powerful family, were using art to express their vision of a new, enlightened society. It was in this context that Botticelli painted his most famous work, a canvas that was not just about a goddess, but about humanity's eternal longing for beauty, love, and transcendence. The painting depicts the goddess Venus emerging from the sea on a shell, blown to shore by the winds Zephyrus and Aura. She is greeted by a figure often interpreted as one of the Horae, goddesses of the seasons, ready to clothe her in a flowing robe. This is not just a mythological scene. It is a metaphor for birth. Not only the birth of the goddess of love, but the birth of beauty into the world, of divine harmony into chaos. Venus is not simply arriving. She is manifesting the ideal. She is beauty incarnate, emerging from the infinite waters of potential into the realm of form and meaning. When the birth of Venus was unveiled, it was unlike anything the Renaissance had seen. Critics praised its grace, elegance, and poetic quality, but others were shocked. Some saw the nude Venus as dangerously pagan, even heretical. Others questioned the bold use of mythology in a Christian society. And yet, the painting was protected, likely commissioned by the Medici family themselves, and it quickly became one of the most admired works in Florence. It was not just a painting, it was a cultural statement, a declaration that beauty, love, and human longing were not sins to be feared, but forces to be celebrated. To the casual viewer, The Birth of Venus is simply a painting of a beautiful goddess. But to those who look closer, every detail is a carefully chosen symbol. The shell on which Venus stands is not random. In ancient art, the shell was a symbol of femininity, fertility, and the womb of the universe. It represents the cosmic origin of life. Venus rising not just from the sea, but from the primal source of all existence. The wind gods, Zephyrus and Aura, are not merely mythological characters. They symbolize the spiritual forces that bring beauty into the world. Their breath is the divine spark, the life force that animates the universe. Even the flowers falling around Venus, myrtle and roses, are sacred to her and symbolize eternal love and spiritual awakening. Nothing in this painting is decorative. Everything has meaning. But the most profound symbol is Venus herself. She is not just the goddess of love. She is love incarnate, both human and divine. To Renaissance thinkers, especially those influenced by Plato, beauty was not simply about physical appearance. True beauty was a reflection of the divine, a force that draws the soul upward toward truth and goodness. Venus's nudity is not erotic. It is pure, idealized, transcendent. She represents the harmony between body and soul, nature and spirit, earth and heaven. And notice her pose, modest, gentle, yet confident. She covers herself, not out of shame, but as if inviting the viewer to contemplate rather than desire. This is not sensuality. It is enlightenment. To us, the birth of Venus might seem like a harmless celebration of beauty. But in 15th century Florence, this painting was dangerous. The church still held immense power, and anything that blended pagan mythology with Christian thought risked accusations of heresy. Yet Botticelli walked a razor's edge. He didn't reject Christianity. He reinterpreted it. Venus was not an idol to be worshipped. She was an allegory for divine love, a symbol of God's beauty made visible. This was radical. It suggested that truth could be found not just in scripture, but in nature, in art, in the human experience itself. It was the Renaissance idea in its purest form, a bridge between the sacred and the secular. In the end, this is the true message of the birth of Venus. Beauty is not superficial. It is sacred. It is a path. It is the language through which the divine speaks to the human soul. Botticelli's painting was not meant to be merely admired. It was meant to transform, to make the viewer feel, think, and question. To remind us that beauty is not vanity, but a glimpse of eternity. And in an age torn between faith and reason, Botticelli offered something timeless, a vision of beauty that united them both. To understand the birth of Venus, you must understand the Medici family. They were not just patrons of art, they were the power behind the Renaissance. Banking kings, political masterminds, and cultural visionaries, the Medici used art as a weapon to shape ideas, control narratives, and immortalize their name. It was likely Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici, cousin of Lorenzo the Magnificent, who commissioned the painting. And he didn't want just a mythological scene. He wanted a message, a vision of love and beauty that reflected the intellectual ideals of Florence and the prestige of the Medici family itself. Every detail of the birth of Venus was carefully crafted to reflect their values: wisdom, harmony, power, and divine legitimacy. It was propaganda, yes, but propaganda disguised as poetry. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery of the painting is not its symbolism, but its face. Art historians believe that Venus's delicate features were modeled on a real woman, Simonetta Vespucci, considered the most beautiful woman of her time. Simonetta was the wife of a prominent Florentine nobleman, but she was also rumored to be the muse and possibly the lover of Giuliano de' Medici, Lorenzo's younger brother. Botticelli himself is believed to have adored her deeply, perhaps even obsessively. When she died tragically young at 23, Florence was plunged into mourning, and years later, Botticelli painted Venus with her face, not just as a goddess, but as an immortal memory. The painting is not just about love, it is love, a love that defied death, class, and even morality. But as Botticelli reached the peak of his fame, a storm was brewing. Florence was changing. The joyful humanism of the early Renaissance was giving way to fear, fanaticism, and religious extremism. The fiery preacher Girolamo Savonarola rose to power, denouncing art, luxury, and pagan imagery as sins. Under his influence, paintings were burned, artists silenced, and even the Medici were driven from power. Botticelli, caught between faith and art, fell into a deep spiritual crisis. He stopped painting mythological scenes and turned to more austere religious works. But the birth of Venus, created before this dark period, stands as a testament to a brief, magical moment when beauty was still seen as sacred, and love was still a path to the divine. Through wars, revolutions, religious purges, and centuries of shifting tastes, the birth of Venus has survived. It has been praised, condemned, censored, and celebrated, but never forgotten. Today, it stands as one of the most beloved paintings in the world, not because it is ancient, but because it is eternal. It speaks to something that has not changed in humanity: our search for beauty, our longing for meaning, our belief that love is divine. And perhaps that is Botticelli's greatest triumph, that in painting the goddess of love, he captured the soul of humanity itself. When the birth of Venus was completed, it was not just another painting. It was a manifesto. It shattered the boundaries of what art could be. Before Botticelli, beauty was often tied to religion or royalty. Art depicted saints, kings, battles, but Venus was different. She was neither queen nor martyr. She was an idea. And that idea, that beauty itself could be the subject, changed everything. The painting inspired countless artists across generations. Leonardo da Vinci explored similar ideals of grace and harmony. Raphael infused his Madonnas with Botticellian elegance. Even centuries later, the pre-Raphaelites of the 19th century saw Botticelli as a prophet, a visionary who painted the divine hidden in the human. The philosophical impact of the birth of Venus goes far beyond the canvas. It embodies an idea that has shaped Western thought for centuries, that beauty is not trivial, it is transformative. Plato taught that physical beauty leads the soul toward higher truths. Botticelli visualized that teaching. Venus is not merely attractive. She is a bridge between the material and the spiritual. She shows us that desire, properly understood, is not sinful. It is the beginning of wisdom. Centuries later, thinkers like Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Freud would revisit this idea, that beauty reveals what words cannot, that it touches something primal and eternal within us. Botticelli's Venus became a symbol of that inner awakening. Psychologists have long been fascinated by Botticelli's Venus. Carl Jung saw her as an archetype, the anima, the feminine aspect of the soul that connects humanity to its inner self. She represents more than beauty. She represents the longing for completeness, the reconciliation of opposites within the psyche. Freud, too, wrote about the power of beauty to reveal suppressed desires and hidden truths. Venus stands at that threshold, not only as an external image, but as a mirror of the inner world. When we look at her, we do not just see her, we see ourselves. Even today, more than 5 centuries later, the birth of Venus continues to shape our world. From advertising and fashion to cinema and literature, her image is everywhere. She has become a universal symbol of beauty, love, and transformation. But perhaps the most important reason the painting endures is this: it speaks to something timeless. It reminds us that beauty is not about perfection, it is about truth. That love is not about possession, it is about transcendence. That humanity, despite its flaws, is still capable of reaching for the divine. At first glance, The Birth of Venus is a painting about a goddess. But look deeper, and you see that it is a painting about us, about humanity's eternal quest for meaning, beauty, and transcendence. Botticelli did not simply paint Venus, he painted the soul's journey. From chaos to order, from desire to wisdom, from flesh to spirit. And that journey is far from over. 500 years later, we are still searching for what Venus represents. And perhaps that is the painting's greatest gift, that it does not give us answers, but invites us to keep seeking.